Morning, everyone get some snacks, everyone's good? Is there bacon out there? I think that's the most exciting part about San Diego. If we go back there, there's going to be candied bacon, but for those of you guys have been here for a while. I think the hardest part about doing this is never the slides or getting up here, it's choosing your walk-up song. I'm a music guy, and I spent more hours choosing a song and listening to the first 10 seconds of every song I had in my iTunes library. I chose Van Halen. If you guys don't know that song, you make me feel old and sad, and if you don't like it, I'm not sure we'll be friends, but I will try my best. My name is Scott Surcke. I'm the director for online marketing at Epson America. So from a day-to-day standpoint, I have responsibility for US, Canada, and Latin America websites. That includes our e-store. That includes what we do in terms of demand generation, analytics, multivariate testing, all that fun stuff. I also spend a lot of time working globally with our parent company, which we'll be talking about in this presentation, talking about global strategies and how we think about data from a global perspective.
And my name is Huang. I'm the senior web analyst for Epson America with day-to-day responsibility in our data practice, from data collection, data management, to data use.
So just to introduce us, outside of us, our company itself, I know that some people probably know who we are. I'm also a realist, and I'm also a data person. And if I look at the data, I'm pretty sure that there's probably about 20% of you in this room that think this is what we sell. I'm sorry, we do not sell that. There's probably about 6 or 7% of you guys who actually think we're going to talk about sports. And unfortunately, that was this morning, a great presentation on the Utah Jazz. We will not mention anything about sports in this presentation. This is really what we are best known for. The printer guys is kind of what we typically say when we introduce ourselves. Most people know us for our consumer printer line that we have here. And while it is true that Epson America, has focused and made its presence known early on in the market based on this product, Epson actually does a lot more things than this today. So we still practice very heavily in the printing space. So on the bottom left, you'll see we still practice very heavily in pro graphics market, printing out fine art photography, fabric printing. We are one of the top point-of-sale receipt printer vendors in the world. So if you actually go to McDonald's, Walmart, Trader Joe's, most grocery stores in the United States, those receipts are printed on Epson printers. We are the #1 projector manufacturer in the world. These projectors here are not Epson, but that's okay. Christy makes great products, but we make large venue projectors like this. We sell very large printing devices. The one in the top middle there is a $250,000 digital press used for short-run printing of labels. We still play heavily in our graphics market with scanning of 3D objects in for graphic artists. We sell factory-automated robots that do small parts assembly. In the bottom, you see there, we do have augmented reality glasses, a product called Moverio. And for all the old people in the room, the bottom right product is a dot matrix printer. For those of you guys remember, there you go. Yeah. Remember how amazing those were and the great noises they made? We still actually sell these today. The SIDM team is a team of 3 people, and they have shirts that say SIDM never say die. They still sell this product today. It is still a cash cow for us, and we sell ribbons for these. So we did mention our parent company and what we do globally. Our parent company is actually Seiko Epson Corporation. And you're probably saying to yourself, are you talking about the watch guys? Yes, I'm talking about the watch people. This is what Seiko is best known for when they started. And so we also know the next question is probably, okay, well, how do you get from this device here to actually all the stuff I showed you on the previous screen? So let me take a little bit of journey on how we got there. So if you go back to the late 1800s, this is a picture of Hattori-san. Hattori-san is actually the founder of Seiko. In the late 1800s, he opened up a clock and watch repair facility in the middle of Tokyo, where he was repairing watches at the time. A few years later, he actually developed his first watch. It was a pocket watch, because at this point, no one had thought that they should make these smaller and strap them to their wrists, like all of us have today. So everyone was walking around with pocket watches, and this is the first watch that he actually produced. It was not under the Seiko name. If you're a watch person, and there's people out there who love this, and we actually have one of these in our building, in 1956, this is actually the first known watch that Seiko actually manufactured. It's called the Seiko Marvel. Wristwatch, it was developed fully with Japanese parts inside, so it wasn't using at the time, which was very common to use Swiss or German manufacturing to actually put all the parts inside. This is a very big landmark product for us. So I know we're still pretty far away from all the other stuff I showed you, right? So how do we tie this back together to printing and what we've done? If you zip forward to the 1960s, the Tokyo Olympics were happening, and Seiko was actually chosen as the official timekeeper for the Olympics that year. And this is a huge technology statement for Seiko as a company. It was the first time they're going to be using digital timers to time track and field, swimming, and all the other events that were happening that year. And they had a problem. They had developed all these digital timers, but they basically had to print out a hard copy to give to the Olympic Committee when they showed the results. So they put their heads together and they said, what can we do? We have these great clocks, we have these great watches. We're going to develop this. This is actually the very first printer that was ever developed by Epson. EP stood for electronic printer, and 101 was because it was the first generation of that. So these printers actually sat along all those timing devices, printed out. It's basically a baby dot matrix printer. Hit a pin onto a ribbon, hit that onto paper, and they printed out the results and then shared that. So after the Olympics were over, Seiko looked at this technology and said, hey, well, this is pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. We've spent a lot of time developing this. What else can we do with this? And they basically decided we can actually spin this up into its own company. We can start selling consumer products into business to actually allow printing, which was cutting edge back then to be doing, for the consumer to do in their home or in their business. So in 1975, they did invent the Epson brand. And the story behind the name that you can tell all your friends, it was actually derived from son of EP, or electronic printer. They took it and flipped it around, and that's literally how they came up with the name Epson. So now you have useless knowledge you can tell your friends when you go into Best Buy or Staples of how we got our name. So today, Epson is actually a much larger corporation. This is actually our presence globally. We have presence all throughout the entire globe. We are located, Nick and I, down in Long Beach, California, just south of here. Our main parent company still is in Japan, large presence throughout Europe, Australia offices through the SEA regions, and have a large global reach today with all of our products.
And one of the biggest challenges that we face as a global company is how do we actually make good data decision across the globe, not just benefiting a few regions, but across the organization as a whole. As we understand that, especially in the information age, that data is critical for our business to operate. And at the global scale, we do have a lot of data that we collect. However, we need to be able to derive knowledge and intelligence from what we collect. So if you look at just in the world of US today, we have about 120 million page requests per year and about 600 million plus page requests per year, which also means that we have a lot of data at our fingertips, but we really need the global data structure for us to make sense of what we collect. So let's go back in time a little bit, right, to the year 2014. So if we look at the year 2014, we have 4 issues that's really preventing us from having a good global data practice. The first one was that we were on an ancient platform. Actually, our vendors didn't even support that platform back then, so we had to kind of patch it up and make it work. But it was outputting a lot of bad data into our system. Secondly, each region had their own disparate system, so therefore we didn't really talk to each other at that point. So to aggregate data to scale was very, very difficult. Thirdly, we didn't have a standard analytic tool nor a single measurement framework, right? So at that time, for us to aggregate, as I mentioned, is very, very difficult. And from a global web perspective and also global governance perspective, we had no global standard at that point. And if we isolate it, zoom in, look at just from the world that we manage at Epson America, we have direct responsibility for US and Canada. At the very bottom layer, as you see, for our tag management at that time, was mostly hard-coded tags, right? We have hard-coded tags about 80% of our pages, which generated a lot of messy data that led to poor marketing decisions that were made at the time. And at the top, from a channel activation standpoint, most of our segments were built in silos within their own marketing channel. And that led to a very expensive multiple strategy hours, very expensive segment. But more problematically is that our customers were getting fragmented customer experience.
So we knew we had issues, and from a global perspective, we kind of said, how do we think about this issue strategically? And how do we solve for this, not just at a regional level, as Nick mentioned, but how do we think about this as a large global corporation? So one of the things that we did as a company was we got all the regions together with our parent company, and we developed something called the Global Web Initiative. And this is really a way that we can formalize the process to talk about technologies that we're using online, talk about data and how we're thinking about data. And we identified some key areas as a business that we wanted to make sure that we could focus on from a global perspective. The first of this was obviously the analytics layer that we had talked about, and related to that was also tagging. So we knew that there was opportunity here to get synergies globally. We also looked at things like basic site performance, right? How are pages loading globally? What's happening to the actual page loads on all these things? We looked at some tactical things like ratings and reviews, selling consumer products. Our partner Bazaar Voice, who manages reviews, probably for some of you guys in the room, looked at this from a global perspective, not just a US perspective. How can we share review content across regions? And ultimately, the core technology platform that we're on was a big opportunity to look at because, as Nick mentioned, our old platform was something that, frankly, really wasn't supported or robust enough for the needs that we had. So 2 years after the MarTech stack that Nick showed you in 2016, we were asked to take a look at all of these things globally and look at 3 things in particular, because we were going through a project at that time. We were re-platforming our entire site. For those of you guys who remember, we keep saying the old platform, we were on Broadvision. If anyone is here is on that, I'm sorry. If you're still on that, I think Sears and us were the last 2 holdouts for a very long time. But we did move over to SAP Hybris, and we implemented everything from the ground up on that. And so we knew we had an opportunity to attack really 3 of these areas from a global perspective. First and foremost was obviously the technology platform that we're on, but then also we basically burnt our entire analytics layer down to the ground and built it back up using Telium for tagging. So this opportunity that we took back to the Global Web Committee was we said, look, we have an opportunity here to really set a precedence here in EAI for us to expand that globally and to really develop sort of business intelligence as a practice, as opposed to these one-off requests that we're getting for data, from a global perspective or from a regional perspective. So in order to do that, we kind of said, let's set up some guidelines around this, and let's talk about, how do we think about data from a very structured standpoint. And we had people throughout the organization who are all along this chain, but in reality, we knew that it started with having good data. Right? If you're not collecting good data, and your data is not secure, you have other problems going on. If you can't get that right, you really can't take it to the next level. So we focused a lot on that. We then tried to ladder that up to turning that into some level of information, right? How can we actually do some analysis on that? How can we digest that? Give that information some shape, some form, so we can start making some decisions about what that data is and if it's good or bad. And ultimately taking that and layering that all the way up to knowledge, which Nick talked about in the beginning, which we really lacked, was how do we take all this data and actually make sense of it to actually make good business decisions?
So we had the opportunity to kind of build our data practice here at Epson, and we really started by building the data layer, and we wanted to approach it from an analyst mindset. Now, what we started doing was we officially documented all the key business questions that our stakeholders were asking. A lot of them were outside of our team. Then we documented these down and translated them into our data collection strategy, which we worked together with our deployment team to come up with a data layer recommendation. We then go into technical deployment that we have our internal team build a data layer within our CMS. And then we also had some variables that we built from Telium IQ's extensions to be able to populate them properly. So on day 1, when we went live, we actually had reporting and we had our analysis. So I was able to keep my job because I was able to do analysis. And this really happens in an iterative cycle because we know websites will continue to evolve, your digital property will continue to evolve, and your key business questions will continue to evolve as well. So for us, we instituted this process in place so that we can account for change going forward. So the first thing I'll talk about today is the universal data framework that we have put in place and its governance. So as Scott mentioned, we had the opportunity to kind of burn everything to the ground and rebuild it again. So when we first launched with Epson, with the US and Canada property, it took about 160 hours from start to finish, from planning to deployment. Now you might be asking, where's the efficiency? Now that's a lot of time. But where we realized the efficiency was for each additional region that we bring on within this architecture, it only took about 10 hours from a duplication to validation standpoint because we were on a single framework and we were on a single data layer. So it was very easy for us to duplicate this process. So if you look at the world that we're in today, we're standardized on SAP Hybris as our main core technology. We first launched with the US, Canada, then Latin America. Now we are on 25 regions globally with Telium as the data layer for all of our web initiatives.
So once we had nice clean data, I know that the presentation right before this and the panel did a great job talking about data governance and the importance. And we haven't necessarily figured it out, but we have some tips and some ideas behind this. We know that data governance maybe is not the most exciting topic to talk about, but it's something that's really important for all of us in this room. I did find this blog, and you can look at this now if you're really bored, but please don't, it'll make us feel bad. But check this out, there was a blog, I don't know Jeff, I sent him an email, if anyone knows him, tell him I really like his blog on Capterra. where he talked about how Rogue One, for our Star Wars fans, was actually a story of poor data governance, and it's written from the standpoint of a manager telling his employee that he has one secret that he has to keep, and if not, then there will be problems, and that was how you destroyed the Death Star. So check it out, it's pretty entertaining. We know that data governance is very important for us, and if you have bad data governance, the best thing that could happen is that you're going to make some bad marketing decisions, right? If you have really bad data governance, the worst thing that can happen is this, and you don't want that to happen to anyone here in the room.
So very quickly after we went live, we understood the importance of having strong data governance to ensure our data stays good and is secure. Now for us internally, this is actually an official 15-page document that we have in place, but I'll try to summarize it in 8 different key sections here within the one slide, so just bear with me, I'll try to power through. So the first section that we defined, we actually relooked at kind of how our teams are structured, and we redefined some of the governance role that we have in place from a strategic level to an operational level to a tactical level and the accountability that associates with each level. Then we started to document every single data variable that we capture and their system settings. Now, we treat them really as assets, right? So any good asset within a company should be well understood, well defined. For us, that means, what are the names, what are the schemas, how is it being collected, and how is it being mapped in the different systems. And you can also use this to communicate with your outside agency so they know what data you hold. So it can also serve as a data dictionary, if you will. Thirdly, we wanted to have a process in place where we capture how we're collecting the data, how we're sending it, and how do we onboard new tags. So for us, there's an official approval process where our security team from IT needs to vet each tag before it goes live, and then we also review it with our legal team to make sure that contractually we can send data to our vendor. Then we specify data access. As an organization like ours, we have different users who are across the world. We also have contractors and also agencies who have access to our data sets. We need to make sure that we know exactly who has access to what part of the system and that they stay current. And how do you deprecate old accounts? Then, once they have access, we need to think about how people are using that data. So for us internally, for you to gain access to our system, you actually need to go through a training program just so you can use the data responsibly and also to share it responsibly. Then how do we make sure that our data stays good? So we actually have a QA process in place every time we have a deployment, and also we provide a recommendation on on-site quality assurance monitoring. Then we need to talk about change management. So as you onboard new systems or new framework, how do you account for that? How do you account for the change logs? How do you account for the revisions? And also, how do you account for personnel changes? As if one of us hits the lottery and we leave, we need to still make sure our data is still being collected. And lastly, this is really intended to be a living document. Therefore, you need to be reviewing these policies to make sure that they're so accurate and so up to date. For us, we do a quarterly audit, but for you can think about doing a biannually audit as well. Now, once we have put this together, the next step is we actually need to evangelize this throughout our organization, all the way to the executive level, because unless you have buy-in, it's very hard to ensure compliance, since this touches multiple different functional teams.
So once we had our data layer in and we had some rules around that, and we thought we had a good handle on this, we kind of said, okay, well, what do I do now? Where do I start? And so the first thing we did after we were implemented with Hybris was we basically took a look at the MarTech stack and spent some time trying to rebuild that out. This actually shows you what Epson's MarTech stack looks like today. On the very bottom, sort of within our business intelligence practice, you can see that we are using Telium IQ. We are double tagged with web analytics from, I say Omniture still, but Adobe and GA 360. We're using ClickTail for session replay, Target for retargeting and testing, and then Domo for dashboarding to share that out. And really all of that's wrapped up with my friend Nick here, who makes me look very smart every day. He's the guy who spends his life going through this and making sure all this data is nice and clean and thinking about data and analytics. The other change that we looked at was at the top of the funnel, and we said, you know what, one of the things that we were lacking was the ability to create segments, and looking at a customer data platform that allowed us to build segments, right? From the presentation this morning, talking about what you can do with those and controlling those segments is super powerful. So we implemented with Audience Stream, and we started building out segments with that. And the key difference for us was that now we were engaging with the very top part of this, and we basically were able to still work with the existing partners that we had before, but we were able to do it much more efficiently. So rather than having each of our partners own all of these segments and charge us money to create them, frankly, we can do that all in-house, and we can own that segment and we can push that out. So while we work with Responses on email today, they were charging us a lot of money to basically create, from a strategic standpoint, all these great email segments. And they would say things like, oh man, if you just give us access to all your other data and your search data, we can make these amazing segments. And of course, that's not going to happen. So now today, we basically say, no, Responses, do what you do well. Send email. Send email when I tell you to send email, and when Telium tells you to send email through Audience Stream off the segments that we created. So once we had our technology stack kind of put together, Nick and I got in a room and we said, all right, what are we going to do? What's our first thing that we're going to look at, and how are we going to use this? We have some cool toys to play with. The first thing we looked at was something that was important to us, and I'm sure for other people in the room, if you guys are commerce online, is a very basic function, which is abandoned cart. So someone's come to the site, they've thrown a printer, they've thrown a projector, some ink cartridges in there, and they bail, and they don't buy anything. And so we said, all right, what do we have? We have all these tools, what can we do? And so we're like, all right, well, we spent a lot of money on paid search. We're going to take this guy and create a segment, and we're going to bid up on paid search for any of those terms. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send them an email. We have millions of people in our email database. We're going to do that, and we're going to do some GDN ads and do some retargeting. We are going to advertise on social. We're going to personalize the site. If you left ink cartridge in your cart, we're going to put it on the home page so you see it. We're going to do direct mail. We're going to do a nice glossy brochure for our projector, and we're going to send that out. And by the way, we're going to take all this, and we're going to multivariate test every combination of this until we find the optimal one. And what we realized is, well, this is definitely possible to do when your team consists of Nick and myself. This is not something that you can really actually achieve at scale. And so frankly, it was too hard and it was too difficult for us to do, and we would never have proved out the ROI for the tools that we had bought and invested into the rest of the business. So we kind of took a step back and said, let's rethink of how we want to do this. This is a cycle that we kind of call, action paralysis. You have so many things you could do, and you just don't do any of those things. And so this is something that I think we have we're able to overcome and come up with a plan too.
Yeah, so what we actually did was we took a step back and then we said, hey, we really need to sit down and plan it out. So first thing we started capturing what are the goals and objectives we want to accomplish with our use case. Whether it's abandonment, right? Whether it's remarketing, personalization. Once we have clearly defined that, then we need to think about, okay, what does our audience look like from a data perspective? Do we need offline data to batch load into Audience Stream to build this audience, or do we need to leverage our partner visitor data? And from there, you need to think about what actions you want to take once you have the audience enter to your site. So with this framework, and when we have defined this, we officially document all of this into a playbook. So here, we clearly define our objective, and this is the actual playbook that we have for one of the use cases. It's a clearly defined objectives of what you're looking to accomplish with the use case. Then you create specific measurable goals because you need to know whether or not it's working, right, and how you can optimize it. Thirdly, then you provide very detailed steps to help you figure out what needs to happen at what point. And keep in mind too, we're taking kind of the segment building back internally, and we're working with external agencies and also internal teams who might be outside of our immediate team. So this serves as a common dictionary for us to communicate and also to keep up to date so we know exactly what's going on. So this documentation was very key for us. And we built what we call a decision tree and action map along with the documentation. Now this might look very complicated at first. It's actually quite simple. So the green boxes here actually just indicates user action or user behavior. And from there, the red boxes indicate what Audience Stream is doing as a user enters or leaves our site. It can be badging the user, or it can be tallying up a score. And the blue boxes are the connectors that's being fired off. And then you can sequence them with kind of a time frame within here too. So when you present this plan to your internal team, it makes it very clear what we're looking to accomplish. So with that framework, we took a step back and we started building our use cases. So I'll talk about kind of the early use cases that we built. And one of the key strategies that we had in the beginning was we really needed to start simple, right? To build confidence, to understand the tool, and to get the connectors going. And from there, we're able to prove ROI fairly quickly and establish a process that we can then replicate for other use cases. So the first use case I'll continue is abandoned cart. So at the very base level, someone enters your site, adds a product to the cart, they leave, session ends, they leave. At that point, we use Audience Stream to send this user information along with their cart content over to our CRM system, and our CRM will send an email back to the customer to bring them back. Now, we know this is a super basic activity and many platforms can do this, but for us, it was a very important proof of concept that made money to justify getting the tool and also set up the first connector with responses, so we feel good about using the tool. The second use case that we set in place was also fairly simple, but we wanted to prove the efficiency capability of the tool. So if you go to our site, and if I log in to our website, our data layer actually tells, well, basically say I'm an Epson employee, so I'm an Epson employee customer. Now, if you enter as a partner, it will identify you as a partner. We then, audience stream will take that information and send it via double click to Google to say, to exclude them from our marketing activity. Now, we love our employees for sure, and we love our partners too. However, for us, they're non-converting customers in our mind. So in that case, we're able to illustrate the efficiency capability of the tool. And you can think about this in other ways too. Maybe you want to exclude persistent non-engagers on your site. And it also allows us to set up our second connector with double click. Now, with the third use case that we put in place is around ink. So as a printer company, we sell ink. That's no secret. And if you ever own a printer, this experience might have occurred to you when you're trying to print a document, whether it's your kid's homework or a document that you need to have tomorrow. And when you print, this little dialog box pops up. This is what we call a low ink reminder. Now, this is a software that comes with your printer software that reminds you by color, maybe some of the inks are running low, as we know that if you want to print something and you can't, it's very, very frustrating. So we want to make sure that we tell you so you're aware, and when you click on it, it takes you to our website with a link, with a page that's with all the compatible ink SKUs along with your printer so that you may purchase in a timely manner so you don't run out. So the way this use case starts is when this dialog box pops up, we actually put a data layer here so we know every time when you're low on ink. And when you click on the low ink notification, you are taken to the ink results page. But let's say you exit without buying. Maybe you think, oh, I'll wait a little bit, it still prints right now, I'm okay. At that point, we take your information along with your printer information and ink information, we send it to the audience stream. From there, we push it out to our CRM system that triggers the email within 2 hours. Now, the 2 hours cadence of delay is something that we tested and that worked well for us because we might not want to send it immediately because that can be a little bit creepy, right? So we waited 2 hours, the customer returned to buy ink, and within the message, all it says is, we think you're low on ink, we think you need to purchase some ink. There's actually no promotion, no discount associated, but it was a very timely message. So what we saw was this email actually converted 7 to 8 times better than our regular emails. Now, we wanted to take this one step further. So in phase 2 of building out this use case, we figured that, hey, if someone who's low on ink, they might be searching right away. So we pushed the same exact segment out to DoubleClick to Google AdWords to bid up on the user who's searching for ink. So as you think about how you want to start your use case, you might want to start with something super simple and then build upon that to make it a lot more complex and sophisticated.
So just to wrap up here, we talked about a few things. I think everyone here understands the importance of data and the data layer, making sure it's a clean data layer, and using Telium IQ really helps us with that. We talked about the importance of making sure once you have that system in place that you can keep it clean. So this is a very difficult, challenging process, and we haven't mastered it, but we've put some rules around data governance. And ultimately, what we talked about is, our recommendation is to start small, which I think was a recommendation from a couple other folks from even yesterday, right? Don't try and do everything at once. Start small, build your program from there, and get successes. And so from a Epson America perspective, this is really only kind of the beginning of the journey for us. Just like we basically trialed Telium IQ here in the US, and now it's rolled out to almost 30 countries throughout the entire globe, our plan is to do the same thing here with Audience Stream. And so we're building these cases, sharing them globally with other regions all over, including our parent company, talking about our successes, talking about our failures, what we've learned, but more importantly, just making sure we're thinking globally about data as opposed to just regionally. So this has been a big journey for us. A big thank you and just shout out to the Telium team who have been great partners and friends. Our friend Dave is in the back somewhere taking good care of us. There he is. Alyssa's maybe somewhere. She's the first person we talked to. We love all you guys. So thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it.